Merhaba Fatih.
Merhaba hocam, hoş geldiniz. Teresa hocam da geldi. Kabul ediyorum. Size hemen co-hostluk veriyorum.
Tamam. Teresa'ya da verebilir misin?
Evet, veriyorum hemen.
Hey Dr. Chen.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Yavaş yavaş salona gelmeye başladılar. 2-3 dakika içinde başlarsak.
Tamam. So, currently audience is in the break, so we'll start in a couple of minutes.
Okay. I have a meeting that I'm already pushing off, so I might have to give the talk faster.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a really precise timeline.
I know. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Would you like to share your presentation now?
Sure.
You have the co-host privileges right now.
Yeah. I do.
Konuşacak mıyız?
Konuşmam lazım. Duyuru yapmamız sende ama
Is that okay?
Yep, looks great.
Başladık. Duyuru yapmaya gerek yok.
böyle
Tamam.
Fatih, ne kadar bekleyeceğiz?
Hocam 2 dakikaya başlayabiliriz.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Başlayabiliriz hocam.
Teşekkürler Fatih. Değerli hocalarım, değerli katılımcılar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bugün oturumumuz 45 dakika planlandı. Birazcık sarkmadan dolayı hızlı gidebiliriz bu süreçte. Ama her şey normal giderse bir 30 dakikalık bir sunum yapacak Doktor Teresa Chen. Ve arkasından da soru ve tartışmalara ayıracağız. Lütfen bu süreçte sorularınız olursa iletmekten çekinmeyiniz. İzninizle ben önce kısa bir biyografisini vermek istiyorum Doktor Teresa Chen'in. Doktor Teresa Chen, McMaster Üniversitesi Sağlık Bilimleri Fakültesi Tıp Bölümü Acil Tıp Anabilim Dalı'nda öğretim üyesi olarak çalışmakta. Hamilton General ve Jurowski hastanelerinde acil tıp hekimi olarak hasta bakım hizmeti vermektedir. Aynı zamanda sürekli mesleksel gelişim merkezinin dekanlığını yürütmekte. Daha öncesinde de 2019-2021 yılları arasında McMaster Eğitici Gelişim Merkezi'nin dekanlığını yürütmüştür. Tıp eğitim ve sağlık bilimleri eğitimi alanında çalışmalarıyla ulusal ve uluslararası düzeyde tanınan bir araştırmacı ve eğitimcidir. Alanda tanınan Academic Medicine, Medical Education, Medical Teacher gibi birçok dergide dahil olmak üzere hakemlik süreçlerinden geçen 300'ün üzerinde çalışması bulunmaktadır. Çalışmaları ve katkılarından dolayı kariyerinde birçok ulusal ve uluslararası ödüle layık görülmüştür. Bu ödüllerden bazıları geçtiğimiz ayda verilen Kanada Tıp Fakülteleri Birliği Eğitici Gelişimine Üstün Katkı Ödülü, 2021 yılında Kanada Tıp Eğitimi Derneği Erken Kariyer Tıp Eğitimcisi Şampiyon Ödülü, 2021 yılında Royal College tarafından verilen Tıp Eğitiminde Erken Kariyer Liderliği Ödülü, 2020 yılında Kanada Acil Hekimler Derneği Ian Steele Yılın Araştırmacısı Ödülü, 2019 yılında Kanada Tıp Eğitimi Derneği Meredith Marks Yeni Eğitimci Ödülü örnek olarak verilebilir. Dr. Chen, Academic Medicine, Journal of Graduate Medical Education, Perspectives on Medical Education dergileri başta olmak üzere 6 uluslararası tıp eğitimi dergisinde alan editörü ve yardımcı editörlük görevini yürütmektedir. Teresa Chen, dijital alanda yapılan akademik çıktıların da önemli bir savunucusu ve geliştiricisidir. Metrik Çalışma Grubu'nun kurucu üyelerinden birisi, Canadian Acil Tıp Eğitim Bloğu, Aliem Grup olarak bilinen Acil Tıpta Akademik Yaşam Bloğu, Teach Laboratuvarı ekiplerinin yönetim kurullarında yer almaktadır. McEmerge ve McMaster Spark podcastlerinin sunuculuğunu da yapmaktadır. Ayrıca tıp eğitimi yeniliklerinin dijital ortamın dışında da geliştirmekte. Gridlock ve triyaj masa oyunları ile acil servis akışı ile ilgili eğitimleri geliştirmekte ve değerlendirmektedir. Dear colleagues and guests, it's an honor for me to welcome Dr. Chen to the Turkish National Medical Education Conference. She will be giving a talk on education technology in the context of changing medical education. And before further ado, I would like to welcome and thank Dr. Chen for being digitally here with us today. And Dr. Chen, we are looking forward to your talk, and thank you very much for being here again.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of your day. It's a great honor to be speaking in Turkey. This is the second conference I have spoken to in Turkey digitally, and someday I hope to visit your shores and see what Turkey is actually like. Yusuf has told me many great stories, and so have my other colleagues from Turkey. So I'm excited to have a chance someday to meet you all in person. But until then, I'm going to speak to you today about educational technology in the context of changing medical education. I have some conflicts of interest. Mostly all of them are for speaking engagements where I've been given a small honoraria, although I do have funding from my institution to do research work, and I'm an associate dean within our faculty for continuing professional development. Today's session objectives are going to be to talk about the landscape of medical education and technology post-COVID and in the virtual world, to identify best practices in engaging learners in professional development opportunities, to think about just-in-time professional development, and to apply analytics maybe in thinking about how we can put all of that together to support faculty and also our trainees. In the great swirl of things, COVID is definitely still very much with us. And as someone who is an emergency physician at nighttime and by day I do all this work, I live with COVID in many different shapes and sizes. But I think that these external forces are actually just helping us see in many ways the things that we've been looking for in our system for a very long time. I think our learners have been craving for us to learn how to use technologies like Zoom and Slack and Messenger and all those other things to communicate with them. I think that we've been looking for our healthcare and education systems to be more accountable to their end users, whether that's patients or students and trainees. And I think we've been looking to have everything become more personalized in all parts of our life. So whether that's your search engine browser or what continuing professional development you might be able to do next. I think we've all been looking for these things for a long time. I think COVID's just made it more obvious. And so when it comes down to it, so much of what we want to learn is really about what we can measure about ourselves. And like I said, the search engines, they know me pretty well because I give them a lot of data. They're able to measure what I want because I'm Googling it, and they can send me the right ads and all those other things. And we know the technology for this all exists out there. But do we have those measurements for our own performance, for our own information, so that we can actually up our ante with regards to our performance as healthcare teachers, as healthcare practitioners? There's a lot of different paradigms of medical education, and Flexner changed everything in at least North America by looking at proposing a 2-and-2 model of basic sciences that would then parlay into some kind of clinical applied experience. In 1990, they wrote about competency-based medical education in Canada, and we decided that, a little while after that, and when I was an education fellow, we designed something locally called the McMaster Modular Assessment Program. All of that to say, our education system in Canada has actually greatly changed, and in 2018 we flipped over to competence-based medical education as a country for my entire specialty of emergency medicine. And so we've been working with and fostering our trainees the last couple of years, and a bunch of them just wrote their exam, but they'll be still sticking around with us after that for the purposes of basically continuing their transition into practice. And so with competence-based medical education, basically there are a set of, we call them untrustable professional activities at different levels that you have to achieve. And so with the data that we get from CBME, we get numbers about how much we would trust that trainee to do that procedure or that skill. But we also learn about the narrative that accompanies that. And so increasingly, we know that the qualitative data that accompanies that score of 1 to 5 is actually really, really important. And I've been really privileged to work with colleagues, actually the one that introduced me, but also other individuals, to think about how we can actually capitalize on that qualitative data and actually increase our ability to understand and what the numbers mean, to triangulate those numeric feedback, to add in valuable information that differs from the stakeholders, to actually maybe even get into sentiment at some point. All of this stuff is going to be really important for us. And so I think there's great opportunity for some of these CBME databases, because we're talking about 200 to 400 data points per resident, at least per year. Every shift, when I have a trainee on with me, I'm usually giving them at least one useful piece of feedback, one useful observation, and a score. And so if you think of each of those as data points, we're accruing a lot of data now in Canada. And so what we're hoping to do is be able to amalgamate some of this in the back end. We're working on some projects to redact the data so we can combine them for the purposes of doing artificial intelligence surveillance and or detection of systemic bias or unseen patterns. And we're going to be looking to capitalize on machine learning or natural language processing. Some of our early work based on the MCMAP or McMaster Modular Assessment Program has just been published in the Journal of Medical Education Research, Medical Education subjournal. And so if you want to take a look at it, you can, I guess, go to JMIR MedEd and look up my name. And there's a preprint there about one of our more recent projects. But the other part of it too is that we have the opportunity to look at the quantitative data. So not only should we be looking at the qualitative data, we also should be looking at the trends of the data and how that can look at. And I've been collaborating with colleagues in the University of Saskatchewan with Dr. Brent Thoma, who's been leading this project, and I've been advising and helping with his projects around Competence by Design dashboard project, where we're looking at different kinds of dashboards. And we have developed 3 kinds of dashboards so far, working on the 4th. But the first is what a trainee development dashboard looks like. What would that look like to represent the data that a trainee needs to see to set goals for their own learning? A competency committee dashboard, which is looking at, you know, as a CBME program, we actually get together and discuss all our trainees and talk about where they're at with the competencies that they're working on. And so how can we at a glance look at all the competencies we have? And the last phase that we have worked on so far is a faculty development dashboard. We have a 4th paper coming out that's looking at program evaluation, and both the faculty development and program evaluation dashboards help us as faculty gain better insights about how we're performing. So as you can see from this screenshot on the faculty development panel, as a faculty, I can see how everyone else is rating, what their tendencies are, how many words they're writing, how many observations, how am I faring compared to my comparators, and actually get performance data about myself as a faculty member, which I think is really cool. And I think that that's one of the big challenges that we have, is to figure out how we can actually incorporate better data about our teaching performance in real time in those ways to be able to adjust and foster our own development, but then also give insights to our trainees so that they can develop better. And not only do we need to have the analytics, but once you have the analytics, now you know you're doing something wrong. We now have to figure out how we can use those learning moments that we create and use just-in-time technology to actually fill those gaps. So you can imagine, as a faculty development opportunity, if I have a dashboard that says I don't write good enough comments, wouldn't it be nice for there to be an app that just pops up a message like, would you like to learn how to write better comments? Here's a quick paper and some quick tips on how to do this better. That's what I mean by just-in-time learning. And I think that we're getting to an era where we'll have enough data where we will be looking for that. And I think, very simply, most of us would just hop on Google and probably find a YouTube video or a blog post that would help us meet our needs. But I think that as educators, we can be thinking about how we can start developing some of those resources. And so some of that is through the work that I've been doing with Canadian, which is a national blog for emergency medicine. And we've done a lot of resources that are very Googleable, very searchable. And so if you're looking up for something in Canadian medical school about a certain topic, then we probably have a blog post about it for you. And so for the learners who are Googling at point of care, rather than chastising them for using Google, what we're trying to do is meet them halfway by finding ways to search engine optimize some well-constructed, vetted materials that they can use to guide their learning. Because we know we're never going to stop Googling things. Most of us have grown up doing it, and it's a hard habit to break. So can we just make the content that's on Google more accessible and better, right? So one of the things that we have recently done here at McMaster is that in response to COVID, which is a big disruption, we had some strategic responses we wanted to deploy. Specifically, those were around actually building a digital library, connecting faculty members through all of the resources that we have, and then using that to be able to generate digital technologies that could actually create new value paths. Structural changes that needed to accompany those helped, and obviously there's always some institutional barriers, but then we actually ended up going on having quite a few positive impacts, although there's been some side effects as well. And so this is a framework by VILE, which is about digital transformation of any organization. But we've gone through this with our own university and our faculty development program. So I wanted to show you a case study where we actually did all this. And so if you go to macpfd.ca, you'll be able to access all of our materials. We put them up on the web, searchable for free, because we want to give faculty development to the world. And so if you go to our event calendar, we have a lot of digital events, some of which are free. We have our 15th annual day in faculty development just coming up soon. So if you want to join us for it, it might be later in your day, but you're welcome to come. And you can check it out. We also have a video archive. So if you can't make it, you can probably watch most of our videos afterwards. And so we have over 150 digital events, and these are all archived and serve as an open access repository on our YouTube channel. But also, we have a podcast. So if you're more of someone that likes to listen to what people say, we have a podcast that you can subscribe to as well. And so in our response, what happened was that we had a trigger, which was COVID. Then we had a strategic response, and we used technologies that were readily available to be able to create new value propositions, virtual events, increased web archival, YouTube archival, podcast. And then we had some structural changes where we had to hire new people, develop a volunteer base. And we had to struggle with, what people had trouble with, which is familiarity with platforms, and lack of clarity about how do we kind of distribute all of this. And then we were able to create some positive impacts, although we know that there's some negative impacts that have come up as well, which is, that we still need more increased capacity, and there's more expectation now for us to provide more materials. And so we've tried our best to be able to meet the need in the time of COVID. And I think that one of the things that we can reflect on is that many of us have done something very similar. I'm sure everyone have been stretched thin trying to reorganize all of your medical education in both Turkey and the rest of the world. And so remember that what you have done is probably one of the biggest changes you've made in medical education in a long time. Taking some time to reflect on what those positive and negative aspects are, and maintaining the things that worked are going to be really important going forward. And I think that we have to think about whether or not free open access medical education, or in this case, free open access faculty development, is enough. Because I don't know that just giving things out there so that people could find them is always enough to encourage people to do work. And so we've been developing something called fact.dev. So if you type fact.dev into your browser, you'll be able to see that there's an online faculty ecosystem that we've created that you can take a look at. And so this is the learning loop that actually Yusuf and I have both been brainstorming, and have recently published a paper on this, So if you want to look it up, you'll have to look up both of our names. But basically what it is a conceptual piece that when he was here doing his postdoc fellowship, we did conspire on working together. So I thank him for that. And we're doing some of this stuff now. And so the idea would be when you have a needs assessment, like that learning dashboard that shows you that you need to work on your comments, then you know that you have a need now. And hopefully you can go and pull information down from a repository, or maybe if we're smart about it, we can push you the information just in time. That micro content needs to be accessible to the faculty member, and then they can actually have that learning moment where they can do micro learning. And then hopefully they can feel like they've achieved something. And if we can find a way to reward them through some kind of mechanism here, and that's where fact.dev comes in, is having some kind of learning system so that they get a little checkbox or a little ping and notification that they've achieved something, so that we can actually go on and award them a micro-credential when they've got it all done. And so the example of this is something called Academia Explorer, which is an 18-month, we call it QUEST, Query-Based Ubiquitous Educator and Scholars Training, where people are going through and doing a whole bunch of tasks. And after the 18 months, and some light gamification where they get incentivized to get their tasks done, they get these little checkboxes as they finish, which is, I think, exciting and good. But then you get a little certificate at the end of it. And the idea would be to give people that reward that they've achieved a certain level of achievement. And so through all of this, what we're hoping is that we can foster a community that is interested in doing that kind of individual pursuit. But I also think there are ways that we can connect better. Because I think that one of the lessons I've learned from the Alien Faculty Incubator, which is an international program that I am currently an advisor for and used to get paid for, but no longer, it has that synergy of both being a community of practice, but also an opportunity for us to connect. These are pictures from before COVID, as you can see, because there's no masks. And we used to have a kickoff. But really, the last couple of years, the Faculty Incubator has been a completely digital experience where our kickoff has been virtual. And we've actually engaged in 12-month Slack-based curriculum development, curricular experience that helps faculty learn how to up their game in education scholarship. This is open to everyone. So if you ever want to try coming and studying with us, it's open to everyone in the world. And if you have financial need, there's ways that we can cut down the costs by subsidy and bursaries. And the Faculty Incubator is a chance for us to have the conversation about things asynchronously. Because as a bunch of Emerge Docs, which is where this started, Alium is a blog, an organization started as a blog that produces content for academic emergency physicians. We were never in the same time zone anyway. And so what ended up happening was creating a digital community of practice was the best way for us to be able to deliver some of this curricular material. And so as you can see, we have a fairly robust and long program where people go through different blocks. They discuss these topics each of the months. There's a break at July because that's when all the new residents start, and one in December because that's when some of the high holidays in North America tend to be. And so what ends up happening is that we have rapid discussions. People tune in when they can. We have a journal club channel. We have a dangerous questions channel where we discuss controversies in the literature. And then they are put into small work groups where they do education scholarship or projects. Notably, there's the Education Theory Made Practical books that this group gets together every year and publishes 10 blog posts, which are then peer-reviewed in the open market through the ICE blog. And then it's spun into a digital compendium after that to create a textbook. And so if you go to alium.com/library, you'll be able to find the Education Theory Made Practical books. Unfortunately, they're all in English except for one of the volumes, which is in Spanish. We haven't had the chance to translate into Turkish yet, but maybe someday. Maybe Yusuf, you could help me with that. And the idea would be that we have been trying our best to be able to deliver good content, but also give these faculty members something to work towards and collaborate on, therefore having a shared craft and creating that virtual community of practice. So these are the books that I'm talking about. And as you can see, they're pretty quick reads. Most people can get through them in a day or so, even if it's not their primary language. And there's 5 volumes. We're working on volume 6 and 7 as we speak. And these are some of my colleagues who have done really great work. And I really think that the connections that we've formed through all of these have been amazing. We have lots of activity over the course of the year, although there are peaks and troughs depending on when. As you can see at the beginning of the program, there's a lot more action, and then maybe in the middle it's a little bit less, but still a couple hundred messages per month. And this allows us to understand how people are learning in that community. And we did some post-course outcomes, which is that people thought that their knowledge went from a 4 out of 9 to a 7 out of 9. That they thought that this is a retrospective pre-post. So they self-rated their pre-knowledge at the end of the course compared to their post-knowledge. They all had almost all of them, well, 2/3 of them had created new curricula. About 50% of them has started a new leadership role because of the course. And the delayed outcomes, which is 2 years out, most had published 4 more abstracts than before, 4 more papers than before, had 7 more invited lectures, had continued to take on more curricular opportunities and leadership roles. And so the lessons learned are that creating a community of practice around all of these things can be very helpful, but can have some time commitment issues for the organizers and also for the trainees that are in the program. I think we can look at new technologies like Slack, like WhatsApp, to change things up, because the learning management system works a little bit. I think it's working for fact.dev, but I think that dynamicism, that chat, the emojis, all of those are actually really important aspects of things that we take for granted, and we need them to communicate effectively. I think teaching people to forget about it if they missed a month and just rejoin and not feel guilt about it, I think that has been helpful. So talking about re-engaging people that may have fallen off the radar and give them permission to join back in. And I think having smaller teams so that people can get to know a smaller group of people have been really important. And so I'm going to stop there because I've kind of did a mishmash and a potpourri, as we say in North America, of different kinds of technologies and how they're changing medical education and faculty development and continuing professional development. And I'd love to open the questions to the floor. I know Yusuf has some questions he prepped for me already, so I'm worried that he's going to ask me a hard one, but I'm going to stop screen share. And then if you have questions, he will also translate. So you don't have to feel obliged if you want to ask the question in English. But I'll kick it over to Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. This has been a really inspiring talk. Değerli katılımcılar, lütfen sorunuz varsa kürsüye gelip sorabilirsiniz. Aynı zamanda oradaki diğer arkadaşlara da iletebilirsiniz. Katılımınızı almaktan memnuniyet duyarız. Thank you for giving this all education technology in a spectrum for different parts of the medical education, faculty development, continuous professional development. So you mentioned about the competency-based medical education in the beginning of your talk. So to my knowledge, there is no program that has been implemented any entrustment skills in any kind of residency education, any kind of undergrad medical education. I know there are new published works around the continuous professional development and health science education to develop this EPA. I'm wondering, is there any suggestion to Turkish community to implement the CBME or any kind of insights from your experience?
So, I mean, we've only been doing CBME in the way that we've been doing it in a national scale for a couple of years. The Royal College started their programs in 2015, 2016, and we were in the second cohort. And so we have a little bit more experience. I know the Americans are developing some EPAs as well. And my experience with the McMaster Modular Assessment Program, which actually you can get all of our tools that we use, measurement tools, to look at alium.com/library. We've published them as open access books as well. I think the lessons I've learned are that it's about the task orientation that helps scaffold the objectives for the trainees at different levels. I think you do need to think about the Venn Mel kind of like principles of CBME. So you need to have the tailored learning experiences that come. It can't just be about it can't just be about the EPAs. It has to be a whole system. So you have to make sure you're having a curriculum that meets trainees along the way. We need to make sure that there are opportunities for people to learn and grow, have their customized learning, have learning that's tailored, that is leveled at different levels so that they can progress. And that we need to make sure that we're focusing on competencies in our curriculum that augments their workplace-based experiences as well. You also need that direct mentorship and feedback, and you need a willingness of the faculty to be able to engage in that. The hardest part of converting to CPME is the culture change, because for many of us faculty, we never had it ourselves. So we have to create a world that's better for our trainees than we had for ourselves. And that's a very selfless act. But anyone who's a parent knows that we always want to do better by the next generation. And hopefully, as inspired teachers that are taking the time to be at this conference today, I can convince you that it's worthwhile to think about how you can be the change that you always wanted. And that was what I did when we did the McMaster Modular Assessment Program. I was a trainee at the time, so I channeled my inner angst and anxiety about how I didn't get enough feedback to create a precursor to our current CBME model, which really is about getting people to focus in on one or two tasks and give you really, really dedicated feedback on that so that you can do better. And I think that attitudinal shift is the most important thing. Then also creating a learning space where it's okay for trainees to be learning and not to be perfect. That's the next part. And those are very hard to change because until you get to residency, most of the time you've had to impress people all along the way. It's hard to turn off that performance part of yourself. And so I think it's about learning how we can flip as a medical community and medical education community from a fixed mindset of this is me, this is how good I am, to a growth mindset where I can learn to do this better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for setting up this ground, because I wanted to follow any additional questions in terms of the educational technology. So I know like there's a heavy data collection in the CBME and CBD. So it is impeccable to not to use any kind of online platform in terms of this process. So do you think the best way to help with the faculties, institutions in the CBM area to implement some early phases of this educational technology tools so that they can have more rigorous data collection and more structured way of collecting data to inform all this work that you presented, the faculty development dashboard, program evaluation dashboard, that kind of insights to generate from this process?
It's all tied together. But yes, I think that if we get better data, we'll be able to make better decisions, right? And so I think that if you don't have data, then you're kind of just making things up. And you're going off of what you think might be the truth, but may not get you the information you need. And I think that what we've learned from the clinical sciences is that sometimes the data is surprising, right? Sometimes when you measure how much COVID is around you, you realize you probably should put masks back up, for instance, right? And I think that we can't just hide our heads in the sand. Like, we need our systems to be better. We need our systems to be more robust. And I think the only way to do that is to start measuring things that we haven't measured before, gain those data insights, and turn them into things that make our whole system better, which is it's so much easier just to put on a lecture and then bask in the glory of being a faculty member. But I don't think that that's the world that we live in now. And I think we could build a better world. But it will take time for us to learn how to do that. It'll take time and investment to be able to enter into that. But I do think that all of that is important for us to figure out.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the mic to the audience. Is there any questions from the audience?
Yusuf, ben İskender Sayık. İki
Merhaba.
soru teşekkür ediyorum bu sunum için. Bunlardan birincisi yeterliğe dayalı tıp eğitiminin insancıl tıp eğitimine etkisi nedir? Bu açıdan acaba bir şeyler söyleyebilir mi? Humanistik yaklaşımı nasıl oluşturur? İkinci soru da özellikle teknolojinin yaşamımıza çok aşırı girdiği bir yerde biz teknolojiyi akılcı kullanımını nasıl sağlayabiliriz acaba eğitimde? Teşekkür ederim.
Ben teşekkür ederim İskender Hocam. So, Dr. Iskender Sayek, one of the founder of the medical education in Turkey, is asking about the humanistic side of the CBME. So, developing this CBME and then asking about what is the humanistic side that's been developed within the area of the CBME and how the implementation of the CBME has been taking place in this context. Oh, you are muted, Dr. Shen.
Yeah, so we just published a paper about the CanMed's roles and where they might be visible or maybe not so visible in the current iteration of the EPAs. CanMeds is a framework in Canada that seeks to define what it means to be a physician. At the center of it is medical expert, and there's communicator, collaborator, health advocate, scholar, professional, and leader, which are the other roles that I think we all have to embody as physicians. I've grown up with CanMeds, and so it's the framework that I think of when I think of what it means to be a physician. As you can see, only one of those things is medical expert, and the rest of it is about the humanistic parts of medical practice. We do know that with the EPAs, they are emphasizing the work tasks, which don't always make it easy to see all the CanMeds roles. Communicator, collaborator are much easier to measure in the workplace. And things like health advocate, which I think it is a different kind of construct, may not be as apparent. And so I do think that it's worthwhile for us to think about how we can move towards an idea of integrating the humanistic side at the bedside while also teaching the medical expertise. And I think that that comes from great teachers like yourself who are interested in passing on that tacit knowledge. And I think we have to respect that at the end of the day with our senior medical students and our resident trainees and fellows. A big part of how they learn is going to be watching us and being an apprentice. And so we have to imbue that in ourselves, and we have to find that humanity in ourselves, which is why I do think that a lot of the humanistic properties of being a medical educator probably need to start with faculty development to make sure that the faculty stay connected to their humanity and don't become tyrants and dictators and grumpy people and bad teachers because they're too burnt out. And so we have to make sure we're fostering all angles of it, because a burnt out faculty member who's been working too much and yelling at everyone is not the person that's going to help our trainees become better humanistic version of themselves. We have to tend to our own wellness. It's kind of like on the airplanes. You have to put on your mask before you put on the mask for others. And I think that sometimes we forget about that. So to me, I think it's all connected, but I do think that we have to look long and hard about ourselves and figure out how we can bring the best versions of ourselves and convey that best version of ourselves to others.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Sayek has another question. So he's wondering about the using technology in education wisely. So is there any insights about, like, we saw all the solutionistic movement during the COVID times, like throwing the technology out there. So is there any wise use of technology in terms of medical education and specific to CBME maybe?
I think that with CBME, it's about really, really working with your end users to make sure you have really good tools that help you gather data well. And I think that what I've watched people struggle with is having those platforms. But luckily, some programs like Elentra have actually gone ahead and developed those things for you. And so I think that as others like Dr. Toma and myself are publishing about these interfaces, it hopefully can give you some of the technical specifications so you don't have to start from scratch, and you can actually start building upon some of the literature that we're publishing around some of the other analytics. I do think that at the end of the day, a great user interface will be very helpful, but it's about bringing that humanity back in. And we can't just looking at tech as a solution. We have to look at tech as a platform from which we will express our own needs. And we need to partner with very talented people to be able to design the technology that we need, rather than settling for the technology that someone gave us. And I think that that's the biggest challenge of CBME is, as you're building the systems, you have to build the software and the hardware kind of at the same time. In this case, is the software and then the EPAs. And so I think that that's where the next challenge will be as we flip over these systems. But I would start small. So with McMap, we didn't try to collect 200 data points a year on the first go. We did start with saying, here's a set of tasks for the junior residents, and they have to get, 2 times 50 over 2 years, right? And then when people found that they were hitting their stride with those tools, we flipped over in CBME, and then now they had to get a lot more. But sometimes you need some meantime innovations to ease people into a new habit. And I think that, as we all know, quitting the old habit and developing a new habit can be difficult. As any one of us who have tried to go to the gym and then fail horribly to develop a habit around working out, we know that we have to find ways to incentivize ourselves, use technology to remind me I need to do 5,000 more steps today. There are ways that we can really use that technology to accentuate what we have. And I think that hopefully the lessons we're learning and publishing on can help you go further and faster than, through the school of hard knocks on our end and discovering it the wrong way. I'm hoping that by looking to other groups like ours where we've made our mistakes, you can learn from them and build better systems than we ever could have dreamed of. And I have great hopes for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. And is there any other questions from the audience?
I have time for one more question, probably. If not, then I'm also happy to say thank you.
We have one last question, so we will conclude after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Actually, it's a pleasure to see you here. I know that you are working on learning analytics and machine learning studies, and I wanted to know how you can apply like early learning systems, because you talk about supervised and unsupervised learning. So we give some interventions to the students by using these methods. And are there any studies that you have already done based on these studies, and how you apply these early warning systems, like in giving interventions to the students, or for the postgraduate students to give intervention to track their progress? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we're just starting to do that work now. I think early warning systems are very data hungry. And in the data sets that we've had so far, they've been smaller data sets because they've been built on the McMap data set. So I think you're gonna have to stay tuned. I think this is still too early for prime time. But we do have a human version of it right now, which is that our competence committee chair has certain kind of flags that we flag, and then we follow trainees along when they've been flagged. And that system seems to have some predictive value, which is that if someone has a low score or a bad comment, we flag them and we just follow their trends and look at whether or not they need more support. We have a very developmental model in our competence committee, so it's a very non-punitive, very much how can we help you better achieve your goals. And in fact, with some of the earlier versions of things, people were jealous that some of our trainees on remediation actually got more resources, and they were like, I wish I was on remediation so I could get it. And so I do think that, again, it's that human side of things. The early warning system is only as good as what you're going to do with it. And so all the technology in the world can give you the flags, but probably right now, as equivalent to having a human just read through it and look for red flags, and having multiple sources of that, and a system that is looking to flag so that people can get the resources they need rather than flag to punish them. And so I think that that's the hardest part that you have to work on, is that attitudinal change, because I think that that's how we're going to make everyone better, is by actually giving them the resources to get better.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. And I would like to thank you on behalf of the Turkish Developing Turkish Medical Education Association. So taking your time with us today and then sharing your insights and wisdom. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you again in person in someday.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Değerli katılımcılar, çok teşekkür ediyorum sizlerin de katılımınız için. Oturumumuz burada sonlanmıştır. Hepinize iyi kongreler diliyorum. Hoşça kalın.
Teşekkür ediyoruz Yusuf Hocam.